If these other states want out, then go for it. I'm not going to stop you. And those states, because the divisions are so stark, the one thing that people have to always worry about with secession is, well, are they going to invade us to keep us in? I don't know how many people would go and die to keep California in the United States. I sure as heck wouldn't. Let them go. So that would be a great thing. Good luck to you. You're your own country now.
America is divided because our powerful federal government pits red states against blue. We need to return power to the states and to the people by decentralizing. If that fails, we must be prepared for a peaceful national divorce or face a destructive civil war. Welcome to War, Divorce, or Federalism. America at a crossroads.
Welcome back to War, Divorce, or Federalism. We'll start where leverage supposedly exists, federalism, and what states can do now to protect liberty. We'll test whether a peaceful separation could outcompete conflict. And we'll track how foreign policy boomerangs into surveillance and control at home. Our guest is Chris Rossini of the Ron Paul Liberty Report, Senior Fellow of the Ron Paul Institute, and author of a book entitled Set Money Free. Chris, welcome to WDF.
Rick, great to be with you.
Yeah, I'm very pleased. I love to get into a little of the wonkiness and my understanding from the articles I've read and so forth. You're a very strong advocate of sound money and of decentralization, things that are critically important to what we're talking about here on WDF. So the aspect of WDF is that we're the strong central federal government, top-down, one-size-fits-all approach is largely responsible for how polarized we are in the United States. And the way to, if we are to avoid a civil war or a national divorce, the only way in my book is to decentralize to an extraordinarily level, to a true federal system. So let's talk just a little bit about that. What monetary and regulatory choices most accelerate centralization? What do you see as like those core issues, and how can you reverse that?
Okay, yeah, well, the monetary aspect of it, there's also been the political aspect, but speaking just in monetary terms, America did start off with sound money because back then the choices for debasing money were there were a lot less tools in the hands of the powers of government to debase, and it was much harder because money was sound. It was a solid thing, gold, silver, and this was the case for thousands of years. And these are market monies, meaning people chose them not by decree, not by government saying this is money. Of course, that's where we are today. But back then, and governments would then just glom on to whatever the market chose. So that's how they came up with, defining money in our early colonial times. They would go out into the market and see what are people using, what are they confident in, and it was I believe it was silver, pieces of 8 or whatever. So they came up with a currency act defining this is what is being used as money. Over time, we got into convenience, and pieces of paper were being used, and this represents money. And now we're into the digits aspect of it, and they just discarded gold, and they could just counterfeit money. And this is not a market process; it's illegal. It's actually illegal for the government to do it. They do it anyway. They gave it the powers to a central bank, so that the government could say, "Well, we're not counterfeiting. We're not breaking the Constitution." So they gave it to a private entity, so-called private entity, and they counterfeit the money for the government and for themselves too. So reversing this is a tough thing because we're all used to the money we use. We know no different, and once you get to that stage, changing even for the better is very difficult. And a lot of times what has to happen is the money itself has to go bad. And then the people, because they have no other choice, are forced to use, hopefully, sound money again. But it doesn't have to be. We could get roped into another bad deal. So, but yeah, it looks like crisis is perhaps the only way out at this point. Maybe not, but that's the way it looks.
You don't, excuse me, you don't have much hope then for, I forget if it was Chip Roy or Thomas Massey put in a bill to abolish the Fed, in essence. Not a lot of hope there.
I don't say I don't have hope. It's good. I mean, this is what Ron Paul dedicated his career to. And what he did is he educated millions of people. So we are in a much better position than we were even 30, 40 years ago, because people understand. You say end the Fed today, and people know what you're talking about. Now, they may not understand the implications or whatever, but they know something is rotten, with the Federal Reserve, whether they know all the details or not. So there is hope in that respect. And it would be great to voluntarily wean yourself into sound money. It's possible. What the probabilities are, I don't know. Doesn't look good, but things, surprising things can happen. So it is possible, and I definitely support what they do. And anytime you hear a congressman or congresswoman bashing the Federal Reserve, it's a good thing. There are a lot of people out there, though, that have no idea, even despite the fact that I would say millions of people do understand now. So, it's very hard to predict the future, but yeah, I'm always optimistic.
Right. Yeah, it's unfortunate we have people like Rand Paul, Thomas Massey, and a few others, but and they carry that torch forward, and I think I think that the awareness is expanding. I totally agree with you. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we're still at we certainly aren't anywhere close to critical mass, but there's always hope, I guess. Tied in with the Fed and that whole aspect, I think, is that the idea of corporatism, corporate state. Can you explain what is a corporate state, and can you give some examples of how it alters the free market, how it rigs incentives?
Yes, that was one of the main reasons why the Federal Reserve was created. Because it counterfeits money to buy government bonds. So now the government can go into as much debt as they want or can, and we see that that's exactly what they do. They're going to hit 40 trillion next year at this pace. How does that happen? Well, when you have a counterfeiter that will create money out of thin air, and then will buy your debt, you now have a buyer of your debt. You don't have to go shop it around to the world. And they do that too, but they have a guaranteed buyer. And that is a prescription for a government that has no limits on what it can do. As long as it could sell the debt, it now has the money to do what it wants. Now, what does it do? It takes that counterfeit money and then goes and funnels it into the military industrial complex, into corporations, into countless corporations. And now those corporations are tied to the government and to the counterfeit money that funds the government. So now you have corporations that are living on counterfeit money and not really concerned with consumers, satisfying consumer demand, allocating resources for our benefit. They do it for the government's benefit, what the government wants. And what they want is what we see: endless war, endless weapons, and anything else that the government wants to finance. So we are very far from a free market. And these corporations themselves, in turn, become very powerful in and of themselves. So now they lobby the government to squash any competition with legislation. So you have all of these government agencies that are staffed by these big corporation employees who come into the government, do the regulating, and then go back out to the corporation. It's called a revolving door. And this is not free market, in any sense of the word. It's a very rigged corporatist market where the government and the close crony corporation, not all corporations, but the big, crony corporations are virtually one with the government. And that's why we see the government uses them for its purposes. I mentioned how the Fed is a counterfeiter. Well, the social media companies, as we saw, as has been proven and admitted and everything, they were doing the censoring for the government. So they're like arms of the government. The government is not supposed to censor. And they could claim that they did not up until it was proven that they were forcing these companies to censor us. So this is the great problem that we have in our nation. It is a marriage of corporation and state, and it is the Federal Reserve and their counterfeiting money that's the glue that holds it together.
Mm-hmm. The when I think about corporatism and I think about subsidies and the different ways in which the market can be manipulated by government in favor of corporations, it brings me to tariffs. And I think especially perhaps how they're being used now sort of gets into the realm of corporatism. Can you just give our audience a quick 30,000-foot view on why you are in favor or opposed to tariffs, and whether there's room for the argument that tariffs can be important as a national security tool?
Yeah, tariffs is a tricky one because on the one hand, I understand the argument for them, and I'm not 100% against them. Meaning tariffs existed in our early history, but we're no longer in our early history. We're in today, where we have an income tax and tariffs, and we're paying them both. And the tariffs today, it was according to Goldman Sachs. Now, whether they're right or wrong, this is what they say. They say that 86% of the tariffs are paid by us, the American people, meaning 14% are foreigners. Now, this is not how it was sold to us. It was sold to us that we're slapping these tariffs on the foreign nations. We're not going to be ripped off anymore by them. And we're the ones paying them. So it's a tax on us. Now, if taxes were coming down elsewhere, if they're getting rid of the income tax and the government spending, none of that is being decreased. It's all being increased. The government spending, the debts are all going up. So the tax burden on us is exponential with these tariffs. So, on the one hand, I understand the logic behind using them, but we're not benefiting from this at all. And tariffs are, as we can see, they just pick these industries. It seems at random. Yesterday he's talking about cooking oils and cabinetries. And I mean, how are they choosing this? How can you rationally choose? I don't know. It has to be political. It has to be a cronyist arrangement to where now you're favored, where you're friends with these people in this industry are getting government benefits. And once you give government benefits to a corporation or to anybody, even to people, individuals, taking it away becomes virtually impossible. So once you give it, it's theirs, and then it becomes politically very hard to revoke your favoritism, whether it be to certain individuals or to certain corporations. So, I would be much less against tariffs if I saw that the government was going in the right direction in lessening its burden on us. But it's not doing that at all. It's just adding tariffs and increasing the burdens that already existed before them.
If there was a uniform tariff, not arbitrarily applied, and if you decrease the income tax commensurate with the amount of money that the people are then being taxed on the back end, because very few people realize that, there at least is a sound argument, whether you agree with it or not, and the implications of the trade and how it affects the economy. And then the aspect of how it's compounded. When people learn that they are the ones paying the tax, it's not the evil foreign country, but then it's compounded by the fact that tax dollars are going to subsidize the people in the industries that are harmed because of reciprocal tariffs or retaliatory tariffs from the nations that we impose the tariffs on. It's mind-boggling how harmful this is to the average American in my mind.
Yeah, those great points. And we are, other countries are retaliating. China, especially recently, with the rare earths, which is just a big one. So we're getting hit by our government, by them. If we are dependent on them, whether we want to admit it or not. They make a lot of stuff for us. And, if you bite the hand that feeds you, thinking you're going to be the tough guy, that could backfire very badly and turn into a hot war, which is a lot of times what happens, which we really do not need at all. But that can happen as a way out to just keep pointing fingers out there instead of on the government here, which is what we focus on.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, let's jump into a little bit more of the WDF, or the federalism, divorce, and war that we always discuss on this podcast. You often critique the Uniparty system as a core consolidation mechanism. How does political capture by elites or institutions undermine federalism from within, and how can that be resisted, do you think?
Yeah. Well, that, I think, even more than the Federal Reserve, has caught the attention of a lot of people on how our politicians are they're not our representatives. In theory, they're supposed to represent us, but in practice, we see that they are bought off virtually. And it makes sense that this is, America has a lot of money, a lot of weapons. So there are big interests, that want to use that for their own ends. And, all they have to do for the citizens is just tell us stories and make us feel good somehow. But in practice, I don't feel like I'm represented by, my senators and House of Representatives at all. And I'm sure I'm not alone. Now, what the big problem with this is that the federal government itself has taken virtually, all the dominating power in our country. We're not, as we were when this country was started, virtually independent little nations. Thomas Jefferson considered Virginia his nation. That's just how they saw it, because they had commonality. They had, whether it be religious or cultural or, in those respects, they had that, and they wanted to protect it. Over time, the federal government just, homogenized and made everybody, the same, and treats us all as it's like we're citizens of the United States government rather than our states, rather than our communities, because they hold all the power today. It wasn't like this. It wasn't supposed to end like this, but this is the road that they took. So now your representation, is, instead of in your state, it's all the way in Washington, D.C. And they want it for the world, Brussels or Israel, wherever the heck they want to put their world government. Good luck influencing that. It's virtually impossible to influence Washington, D.C. So, that's part of the, but this has always been the dream of authoritarians, tyrants. They want from their central location to rule everything. And that's not going to change. But fortunately, history has shown us that they always go bankrupt. And our country, the United States, is proving that rule. It's definitely not showing that it's an exception.
Yeah, well, very good point. Do you have, just as an aside, any kind of timeline where you think the financial system's going to collapse under the weight of the now $40 trillion debt?
I don't, because it's because the dollar is a worldwide currency. Whereas, when we hear about German hyperinflation in Argentina and they don't have a global currency. So it's a local scam that, goes up in flames quickly because it doesn't have an outlet to the whole world. We have an outlet to the whole world, which is what shocks me, that it's still going at 40 trillion. But So predicting when that stops, and there's just too many variables in life to try to predict that, because you don't know future choices, you don't know future motivations. You do know that if they go at this, if they keep going at this pace, there will be a brick wall that they hit, and we are starting to see that foreign big superpowers are pulling away from us.
Yeah.
Russia, China, Iran. These are not small, these are not countries that we just go beat up on. They could beat us up if they wanted to. And they are, getting away from the dollar and trading amongst themselves using other currencies. So these are all signposts that we're hitting the end. But, to say, it'll happen in 10 years, 20 years, 1 year, it's, I think, impossible to do.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I believe that you've written about digital censorship and centralization tendencies. And there's, I think the beautiful thing about, say, crypto and decentralized finance and all of that is that it really does very strongly pull the economy to a more decentralized approach, which I think is why many countries are fighting it so much with their interest in CBDCs. Do you see the digital decentralization as a integral component, or is it just parallel with the desire for political decentralization?
Yeah, that's a mixed bag for me, because on the one hand, I do like Bitcoin itself and what it represents and what it's being viewed as, digital gold. Um, and, based on my understanding, it can't be changed, or it's very almost impossible to change it, where, it's 21 million Bitcoin is the cap. It makes me leery when I see governments, our government especially, embracing it, because they're not our friends. They're not looking out for our interests. So what's their angle to it? They definitely, I'm not a fan of this stable coins, because they're programmable money that can be programmed, on what they're used for, and they're tying it to buying of treasuries, meaning this is another outlet instead of the Federal Reserve. These stablecoin companies are buying treasury debt as their backup. So now the government can expand by using stablecoins. So I don't like that, and I don't like that it's programmable. That it's that they could program it, they could censor it. It's your transactions are transparent. So that I don't like. That I do not think is in our interests as free citizens. But I can see that that's what the government wants, and stable coins may be a privatized version of CBDCs, where they say, "Oh, don't worry about CBDCs. We have these private companies, but if it's the same as a CBDC in that it's programmable and seizable and censorable, then what difference does it make to me whether it's Tether or the Federal Reserve? It's the same thing, just in a different wrapper." So sure. That's my thoughts on crypto right now.
Yeah, it's the same thing as what we saw with Twitter and Facebook. Sure, they're private, but government was able to get in and manipulate them to the same end effectively.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the loss of state sovereignty, it's almost a joke to say those two words together, but a lot of it comes because all the money is sent to the federal government, and then the federal government bestows it back upon us after wasting a good percentage of it. And the money it sends back is with strings attached. Do you see, from the state perspective, it's going to be difficult, but I'm asking you more from the national perspective. If you were to advise Rand Paul, Thomas Massey, and others, is there a way that we can weaken that stranglehold the federal government has? Can they move to change sending the money back in the form of just block grants with no strings? What approach would you take if you were advising?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I'm qualified to advise them. They would advise me. But in this scenario, I don't know. Because getting politicians who are corrupt to outlaw their own corruption is, very, hard to do. I don't even know if it's worth the effort. Because again, we were talking about tariffs, and now you're entrenching interests. These are all entrenched interests that don't want to see their lifestyle, number one, change, and their lifestyle depends on, this system. So in order for them to go and legislate their own lifestyles away, I think is not an option. I'm now I mentioned crisis before. It's during those times that people start to look differently at their situations. And I think in those situations, states can start thinking about themselves. Once they see that the federal government is weakened and inept and doesn't have the strength to even do anything to you, you can now start acting independently. And that, I think, is a good thing, especially if you have some independence already. And you're like, whenever I go down to Texas, I see the Texas flag. They fly that flag everywhere. They have that sense of state, unity and independence. And if something happens where DC can't stop them from either separating or whatever, gaining some independence, then that I think is more of a realistic scenario than the government itself regulating its lifestyle out of existence.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. Change is not going to come from the top, and it sounds so obvious when you say corrupt officials are not going to change laws so that they can no longer be corrupt. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Lately there's been a lot of talk about blue states wanting to. I mean, blue states have a newfound appreciation of the 10th Amendment under Donald Trump's second administration, and they're talking about soft secession. And what they're referring to, I mean, it could mean different things. It would have a lot of power if they could actually withhold income tax from the federal government, but there are Supreme Court cases that indicate that they cannot. So it's very limited on what they can do. Do you have any thoughts on this? Do you have any awareness of kind of what their approach is and if it could be successful at all?
I support any secession, actually, because that's healthy. That's what we need. Having one centralized, Goliath in DC dictating to 300 million people. I mean, it's absurd when you think about it. And any state that throws sand into the gears, even if it's a leftist state that I totally disagree with them, I'm all for them throwing sand into the gears. And unfortunately, this is what happens to whoever is out of power, and then the Republican red states, even DeSantis, what he did in during COVID. That's wonderful how he told the federal government that he's not playing, So I support that, and he was right. He ended up being on the right side of the issue. Now, if these other states won out, then go for it. I'm not going to stop you. And those states, because the divisions are so stark, the one thing that people have to always worry about with secession are they going to invade us to keep us in? I don't know how many people would go and die to keep California in the United States. I sure as heck wouldn't. Let them go. So that would be a great thing. Good luck to you. You're your own country now. So again, I think all of this, could happen in the future. But again, people like COVID, they don't like to take off their masks until it's safe. So people don't like to do things until they're assured that there's at least a realm of safety. So when they see that the federal government can't handle anything, they'll go, and that'll be great for what happens next.
Yeah. Moving on to divorce. Now we're talking. You brought up secession. with regard to Texas, Texit and California's Calexit. Would there be any signs that would indicate to you that a real movement, I mean, these movements have been going on for a long time, and who knows, they seem to be picking up steam, but that we are on the precipice of actual movement of a secession, of a state seceding? Anything that triggers you to say this is about to happen?
Not yet. I mean, it's secession also, let's say there is a conflict, that all has to be factored in. You're going if there's a conflict, you need weapons, you need money, you need, all our money is digital. I'm sure they could cut off anybody that's planning on, revolting. So that's very tricky. So I don't know if, we're anywhere near something like that. And honestly, I don't want to see conflict in our nation. That's not what I would want. And, but when empires end, even when you think back at the old Spanish Empire and the British, the countries, like dominoes, they declare independence, and the old British, they couldn't do anything about it. Okay, we have to accept it. They're independent now. That's the ideal way, to avoid death and destruction, because Washington lives on that anyway. So you don't want it turned inward on us. No, I don't see any of that now. But even just the thought of it, like I said, it's tougher though, because Texas has its history. Here in New Jersey, where I live, there's no cohesion like that, to where you have this unified, hey, let's do this for New Jersey. It just doesn't exist. My state is an appendage of Washington, basically. It's a leftist state. So, it's difficult, to see the future and predict it. But we do want to encourage, people to have unity, because that's the ultimate goal of totalitarians, is to muddy the waters, whether it be through, mass invasions, through culture, to have no unity amongst yourselves, because without unity, you're not going to rebel against, the centralized power. In fact, your disunity, your differences, they will use for you to fight against each other. And that's exactly what they do in our culture, with our states, is with left and right. Everybody is so focused on their own, pet project, that they're not focused on the centralized power. And that's by design, to make sure that the centralized power keeps everybody disunified and at war with each other rather than with itself.
Oh, one scenario I see is, I mean, and I think it sounds like you might be tracking right along with where I'm at. It is possible that we could get a peaceful secession out of Texas or California. And once that happens, that may be a domino that shows the weakness, or sets the precedent at least. And you may have other secessions. You may have then coalitions of states that get together to say, you know what, we're gonna leave as well. And it could all happen peacefully. But I wonder, so for instance, maybe New Jersey, but some of the states where there isn't a clear-cut state unity, I'm wondering if civil war doesn't look so much like a national civil war, but an intrastate civil war on whether to leave or not leave, whether to join this group or that group. It's something I hadn't considered previously.
No, that's true. And my state, even though it's a leftist state, there are red aspects to it, and even growing red aspects to it. So it's not unified in that. And honestly, that's, when the Roman Empire fell, it was mass decentralization that followed, and people, came into their own unities. Community is your family first, and yourself, but then your community, because that's where we live. I live here. I have my resources here. I have my ends that I want to achieve with the resources I have. Even if my neighbor were to come into my house and want to solve problems, he'd have to ask me, well, where is this? Do you have this? He doesn't know what's here. And that's my neighbor. So now the further you go out to the county, to the state, to the federal government, they have no connection to your local situation whatsoever. And that doesn't bother. They just care about power. It makes them feel good, and whatever else goes through their minds. But they have no connection to your locality, to the resources that are there, to the problems that you have right there. And that's why all of this always falls apart, because they're impotent. It's a house of cards is what it is, and these houses of cards get very big. But in the end, once they collapse, because they are, built on sand, it goes back to, okay, here are our problems. Here's the people that I know that have this, and then you can, get into local communities. You're now unified. You all want to survive, and that's what happened after the Roman Empire, and that's probably what can happen here. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. The one of the concerns for people that I've spoken with that are very opposed to the idea of a national divorce is that there may be then resulting polities that where baseline human rights are lost. It becomes tyrannical. And so they say we need to be all one big national government so that we don't have a sub nation, if you will, that is I suppose like Eastern Germany or something, walled off and people lose rights. Do you give any thought or legitimacy to that concern? And if you do, how can it be prevented?
No, I don't. Number one, I'm religious. I'm a Catholic, so I believe that we're all, we're all sinners, and that can't be wiped out by any type of government. Even, I may have people in my neighborhood who beat their wives. It's a part of life that no form of government can stamp out completely. So to think that there will be bad governments, yes, there will be bad governments. There will be good governments. The key is to have a selection of exit. Right now I can't exit. I could go to Pennsylvania and Delaware. So in that sense, if New Jersey totally went to hell, it would be good. But I can't exit the federal government. That's for sure. So there is no. When you have a big centralized power, there is no exit. So there will be tyranny in this world. There's no abolishing it. There will be liars. There will be thieves. There will be murderers. And as much as we would like to get rid of it, these are things that are intangible. When a person commits these things, it's their minds, their souls that are choosing it. No legislation, no gun can stop that. So crimes will happen. But again, you want it to be localized. Now crimes happen on a massive scale. They kill millions and hundreds of millions like it's nothing. When you have local power that only has its resources, it can't kill hundreds of millions because it doesn't have the ability to. What we have today, they have the ability to. And we all suffer for it. When Fauci makes a mistake, everybody suffers. Now, why is everybody listening to this guy? Whereas if you have localities, when your leader makes a mistake, the locality will suffer, yes, but everybody else around doesn't have to suffer. So the more you centralize, the more victims you're creating once bad policies, and there will be bad policies, are enacted. So, yeah, trying to avoid bad things, while, of course, it's logical to want that, but we have to accept the world as it is. And thinking that politically and with government and with legislation that you're going to stamp out all evil, it's just not going to happen in this world.
In this scenario where we have a peaceful national divorce, what role would you give the current federal government? Would you want to see it as a dispassionate mediator involved, just completely stand aside, or a strong guardian of basic rights?
Yeah, I would. it's amazingly the one thing that we want them to do, they failed out so miserably, which is protect our border. I mean, they not only didn't protect it, they opened it and let 20 million people in. So, I mean, if you're not even going to do the basic stuff, that's one. But I don't even, the cost of that, we're at $1 trillion a year for national defense, and it's not national defense by the longest shot you could think of. We have 1,000 roughly foreign military bases. They should all be closed. We should not be policing the world. China, who is this big enemy, they have one foreign military base in Djibouti, Africa. And we're supposed to fear that they're taking over the world, that they're going to be under our beds. Well, we have 1,000 bases versus their one. Who is the one that is trying to conquer the world? It's pretty obvious. And we've been at war for at least 100 years with tiny, tiny breaks, trying to, all the official reasons were nonsense, but to conquer the world, our elites, our oligarchs. So no, the federal government shouldn't be doing any of this stuff, and they shouldn't be involved in to the degree that they are in local situations. They are our boss more than anybody, even, and it shouldn't be that way because we're all different. Where you live, Rick, is much different than where I live, and what, your community is different than mine. That should dominate. And as long as, nobody's hurting anybody and you're doing your, what makes you happy in your life, then that should reign supreme and not dictates from government on all aspects of our life, whether it's even to what goes into your bodies with medicines and this and that, or fake medicines, so yeah, it's out of hand. It's out of control. So we live in a very interesting time. But we have to break out of this because they're just going to keep squeezing harder and harder.
Yeah, let's move on to war. What do you think is a likely chain of events that would actually bring us to a civil war where a good part of the nation is in armed conflict with itself?
I can't see it, but that doesn't mean that it can't happen. I only know what I know. Mm-hmm. I don't know, because our nation is a vessel for powers that are above our government. So I don't know that fighting amongst ourselves, I mean, we have cultural issues here, bad cultural issues, but I don't know that would come to let's take guns and start shooting each other, because we're comfortable here. As bad as things are on a government level, we are fed, we have entertainment galore, we have the bread and circuses. So I don't know that people would go through the trouble of fighting. Now, will there be, like we've seen, fires in the cities and riots? Of course, but that's always been the case in the cities. Would it expand outside of the cities to now people in the suburbs who are living pretty comfortably? They're going to take up arms? I guess it's possible. I just don't know that that's in our near future. I hope it's not. I don't want to live that kind of life. And like I said, you need weapons and money and a lot of times the end result is not much better, because wars and civil wars, there's tyranny. It's top down from there too. And a lot of times they act as tyrants, even if you're on the good guy's side. Even if your fight is noble, tyrannical things are done to win. And then after the war, those tyrants are still in power and they're going to want to keep their power. So I don't think that that's a road that we want to go down in any sense. And I hope that what we were talking about earlier, peaceful secession, the federal government's not going to be able to stop us. Let's get out now. I'd like to go that way instead of, with guns.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I know people get their, passions in flames and shout for civil war, but I don't think any reasonable person thinks that that's a good idea, which is in large part why we're having this podcast, so we can talk through the options and we can rationally discuss the possibility of secession and national divorce, so that if things hit the fan, we've got it covered. We already touched base. We already know what the plan is, that. Another argument that people say to me on a reason to avoid civil war, reason to avoid secession and national divorce is because of the strength we have as a nation going from coast to coast, our very large geographic boundaries, a very large population, and that gives us the strength on the world stage, which then in their minds translates to the freedom that we have at home. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we're not as powerful as we've been told. Militarily, we can do a lot of damage. And if you look at the wars that the United States fights, it's largely against countries that it could beat up on, and they do beat up on them. And their only recourse, these countries, is terrorism. And even now Venezuela. If they go in and beat up Venezuela, it's a country that militarily cannot beat us, but we have now bumped up against countries that can beat us. And, it's not something I would ever want, but we have to be realistic that these are powers, nuclear powers. God forbid it ever came to that. And I think that Russia, China, would rather see the scenario that we are talking about of Washington just beating itself up to a pulp so that they don't have to fight a war against us, because that's a war that nobody wins. So they want to, I would guess, want to wait us out. I mean, we're just doing it, our government is doing it to ourselves. One bad move after another, one war after another, one bailout after another, that if they could just wait us out, it's like us waiting our government out so we could secede. I'm sure they want to wait our government out so that they could avoid a catastrophic war, because they've built societies in Russia and China especially, that why would they want to see that go up in smoke for, stupid America? So, but us, we should not, we have this massive country. We have all the resources we want. We just have a government that has just strangled us to death. It's a massive burden, and it has destroyed entrepreneurism here, destroyed, the American spirit. That's our problem, not being on the world stage, whatever that means. We don't live in the world. We live wherever you are right now. So, if we could just get this albatross off our necks, and that's our own government, then, great things can happen again in America. I think being, on the world stage is just a stupid thing to even aspire to.
Yeah, food for thought. I can't disagree with that. Chris, I'd like to go through a few questions. We call them rapid fire, and so we'll just hit them, and then I'll be able to set you free. All right, okay. Price controls, are they ever justified?
No, I don't think so, because they either create shortages or gluts. So let the market. A lot of times you don't like the price. If there's a hurricane and the gas price shoots up, I'd rather the gas price be high and I can buy it versus, sorry, we're closed. We had to keep the price artificially low and now we have no gas. So, let the market set the price. We have to accept reality. Yes, people will take advantage of it. People take advantage of stuff all the time, but at least you want access to that product at a higher price. You could at least get it versus the shelves are empty. And that's what price controls do.
Yep. Central bank digital currency, a poison to freedom or a manageable tool?
Poison to freedom. That's centralized. They would control our transactions, perhaps even control which transactions we could make because it's programmable. They could take our money. You could go to your bank account and see, where'd my money go? Well, they took it. So, big no on that.
Okay. National divorce, percentage of likelihood happening in the next 15 to 20 years.
Oh, that's tough. What I want or what do I think would happen? I don't know. I'll go 40%.
40? All right.
I'll go 40%.
Let's say the same thing. Civil war, percentage of likelihood happening. And let me restate. Civil war in whatever form, we're talking just large-scale armed conflict. Percentage of likelihood happening also in the next 15 to 20 years.
Because our country is not, we're too comfortable here, and we don't even rebel, against our government when they locked us in our homes for 2 years. So the chances of people getting up and taking guns against their neighbors, I think I'll go 5%.
All right. And we kind of covered this. I just want to hit it. Tariffs. Do they help workers overall?
In our current state, no. Could it be done like we talked about earlier? Yeah, perhaps it can be done. I'm not going to close the door on tariffs 100%, but the way it's being done now, no. What we have is we're paying the tariffs, and President Trump says $18 trillion. Where this $18 trillion is coming from, who knows, is going to be invested in the United States. That's the story we have today. Now, will some money be invested here, and will jobs, perhaps? But as of now, 80,000 manufacturing jobs in this second administration have gone. So we're not even keeping pace. We're not even staying even. 80,000 or 78,000 manufacturing jobs have been lost. So no, workers have not been, improved with tariffs in this current environment.
There's a lot of movement in some states where they're looking to maybe solidify or increase their sovereignty, and they're looking at making gold and silver legal tender. Do you think that has the potential to have substantive effect, or do you think it's symbolic?
It may be done for symbolic reasons, but I think it can be substantive. I mean, we need people to think about real money, real assets, something that can't be counterfeited away, which gold and silver, that's what, that they are. You have to dig them out of the ground. It's very expensive to do so. And in that sense, more is created, but at a much, much slower pace than Jerome Powell deciding to, print $1 trillion with the stroke of a keyboard. So yeah, the more of that, the better, because people have to start thinking differently about money. Like I said at the beginning, we've grown up and lived in this type of system. We don't know any different. So introducing the better is always a plus.
Okay, last question I have for you. The strings that are attached to federal grants when given to the states. If you were a governor of a state, would you take the money or would you walk away?
Well, see, with my mentality, I'd never be a governor of a state. They should not take it. Yeah, I can't jump in their shoes. I'd be the worst governor because of what I believe. They wouldn't even think of giving me the money. Like Ron Paul, when he was in office, the lobbyists would walk past his door. They didn't even bother knocking. Hey, how you doing? They would just go to the next guy. So that's how I would be as governor. They would know that you don't even try because he's not going to do it. So I would say no, but I'd never be governor because I would say no.
Yeah. Well, or if you were, you'd be definitely a one-term governor. I've thought the same about it
exactly.
if I were ever governor. Yeah. Yep, definitely. Well, Chris, it's been great talking to you. Can you let our viewers know where they can learn more about the Ron Paul Report, Ron Paul Institute, and yourself?
Yes, the Ron Paul Liberty Report is on 5 days a week. You could go onto Rumble to find us. My co-host, Daniel McAdams, is on with Ron Paul Monday through Thursday. I'm on with Ron Paul on Fridays. You could also visit us at the Ron Paul Institute, ronpaulinstitute.org. And if you like what you've heard from me and want to follow my daily thoughts, I'm on X at Chris Rossini.
At Chris Rossini. All right. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you, Rick.